Hey, working on computers. It can be really fun until the computer gets in the way too much, and then you're fighting a computer, and it's no fun. I think a lot of people, when they're modeling, the dream is that the computer just kind of disappears, and they're just able to interact with it as directly as possible. And one of the places where the computer can kind of get in the way, especially with 3D modeling, is selecting stuff, because you have to stop and you have to select all the different things that you need. But Blender actually has a bunch of different techniques for selecting things. And so somebody, I forget who, said it could be fun to go through and do a tutorial about different selection methods. And I think that's true, because if you can figure out how to quickly select stuff, it's gonna make you so much more efficient when it comes to modeling. And look, this is gonna be a data dump. This is just gonna be too much information, probably, unless you already know a lot of these, for your brain to hold on to. That's kind of how hotkeys work. And the thought isn't that you're going to remember all of these right now. It's just to introduce the idea that it's possible. So if you ever find yourself doing a repetitive task and your hands are starting to hurt and you're like, I wish there was a more efficient way, you'll have this video floating around in the back of your head, and you can either rewatch this video or just know like what to Google to find out what that hotkey is. Because the hotkeys can get a little wacky. Right now, first I'm going to start with editing, like selecting vertices and all of that. Right now we're in object mode. I'm going to go to edit mode, and up here, this is vertex mode, edge mode, and face mode. And you can select those with 1, 2, and 3 on the keyboard. Vertex mode, we're getting extreme basics for a second, and then we'll get more complex. Vertex mode just lets you control the individual points. Edges let you grab, the edges between, and faces are the whole square right there. So let's start with face selection mode, although a lot of these methods also work with the other modes. Like here, let's show you real quick. I can grab the whole face right here, but with in vertex selection mode, I have to actually grab all 4 of these faces before, or vertexes before the face is selected, and so it's fairly intuitive. But let's go back into face selection mode. So the way I just did that, you just click on it. But then we click on another one, the first one deselects. So if you want to keep both of them, you have to hold down Shift. And that's going to be true for a lot of the selection methods. If you introduce, if you hold down Shift while you do any selection method, it'll add those new selections onto your previous selection. If you want to select everything, you hit A. And to deselect, you hit Alt-A. Oh, here, let's turn on screencast keys. Yes, there we go. So A, Alt-A. One thing I use a lot is box selection mode. Like, let's say we just want to grab some of these up here. If you hit B, you can just kind of grab them, although that didn't work very well. And so you can just hit B again, and using the scroll wheel instead of left click, you can make a new selection, and that'll deselect anything you select with the scroll wheel, which is kind of handy, but this is still going a little bit slow. So here, let's hit Alt-A to deselect all of that, and I'm gonna hit C instead, and this gives me this circle, and I can scroll with the scroll wheel, make it bigger or smaller, but that just lets you kind of swipe around and you can grab the faces you want. And I use this one all the time. If you have faces you want to deselect, you just use the scroll wheel, boop, 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 and that erases them. I'm trying to teach myself to use this new method, which is, I think a box, I don't even know what it's called, but if you hold down Control and Shift and click, it'll make a full box between where you have and where you've gone. So yeah, just Control Shift, click, and that's very efficient. A lot of times, it's easier to actually select what you want to keep and then invert the selection. Like if you import a photo scan, a lot of times it'll have all these random little extra bits that you want to get rid of to clean things up. And instead of having to go through and select all of these, I just want to click on this, select all the linked, and then hit Control-I to invert the selection, and then I can just hit X to delete that. And that's a lot faster than going through and selecting everything I actually want. Okay, how did I select linked? That's one I use so often that I actually mapped it onto my mouse. Normally it's Control-L, or again, if you can't remember all of these, just go up to Select, and you can find all of them right here, or at least most of them. So select linked, and I have it mapped to button 4 mouse, but normally it's just Control-L. Poof! And that means if I want to grab all these, I just have to go click, button, Control-I, X, delete, and it's very nice. And just to clarify really quick, so if you hit L, it'll just, you can see the active vertice is the one that's white, and it'll just select all the linked connected to, the active vertex. Whereas if you hit Control-L, it'll link everything connected to anything that's selected, at all. So we can add this one and hit L, and so. Another time I use that, here, let's select that, is going select, checker, deselect. And that's very handy, especially like, say you have an entire loop of something selected and you don't want to like go around selecting every other square because it's a pain. You can just select the whole loop and go select, check or deselect, and that just does that by default. If you don't want it to be every other square, this is one I just found out about that I'm trying to build a muscle memory for right now. You just select one and then you select, another one, and if you hit Control-Shift+ on the numpad, it'll just keep that pattern going. In fact, it'll bounce around like that screensaver thing, which is kind of fun. Okay, and I just showed this one, but if you hold down Alt and click, it'll select an entire loop. Boop, 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 which is really, really handy. This is a really frequently used one. And if you include Shift, it'll just let you select multiple loops. And if you click again, it deselects. And again, the same with vertexes here. You can select a row of vertexes. These are, it all works the same. Okay, so what if you want to select all of these faces up here on the top? You could use a circle here, but a lot of times things can get kind of messy, and that's a little bit tricky. I already showed you can hold down Control and Shift and just select everything, within that box. But let's say it's not a perfect square. Actually, maybe that would still work. Oh, nope, that introduces some weirdness. What can we do? Well, what I used to do, and this is where it gets into a little bit of nitty-gritty, if we go to the side view here, you can see what we want is all these faces here. But if we select this, it selects the front faces and not the top because we can't actually see the top. But with the same setup, if we go into X-ray mode up here, or I use the hotkey Alt-Z, you can see the hotkey listed there, suddenly this will let us select all of these top faces, which is an easy way to do it. And so that's how I've always done it, but there are more efficient ways. The first one, and one that I do use a lot, is Shift-G, and that brings up the Select Similar menu, and that would let you, let's see, select by normal, and that means any face oriented in the same direction it's going to select. And you can open this menu here, and this gives you a threshold in case it's not all perfectly flat. You can expand the threshold, and you can kind of dial that in. Use that one a lot, especially if I'm trying to model a lot of things in parallel, like if I'm extruding up a bunch of buildings and want to select like all the rooftops, I can just go Shift-G, select by normal. I use some of these other ones, like area can be surprisingly useful if you have just a bunch of faces. If you're using like doing a big tiled thing, and you're like, oh, I just want to select like all of these hexagon shapes, you just go select by area. Right now, I think these are all square enough that, okay, yeah, because I did some random extrusion, it isn't perfect. But other things X-ray can do, like right now, if I'm selecting, it's just selecting anything I can see and it's leaving the back more or less alone, I guess. Are we actually getting some of the bottom ones? Okay, so there's a little bit of bleed there, so you wanna kind of be careful, stay inside the edges. But if you hit Alt-Z, go into X-ray mode here, you can also select the back faces, which sometimes is handy, other times that totally gets in the way. One I forced myself to learn this last year, which has been really handy, is you select one, and then you just control-click, and it kind of connects them. It's kind of like a worm, which is really handy. I keep saying really handy. All of these are really handy. It's just, the trade-off is you have to remember all of these absolutely preposterous hotkeys. For example, let's say we want to grab all of these top faces, and you go, oh, okay, well, we'll just go Shift-G, select by normal, except then it selects all these other ones too. You can get more granular, and you can say select linked flat faces, which goes by normal. You still have, that option down here, but it doesn't go beyond any harsh corners. And there used to be, that hotkey used to be Control Alt Shift F, but I think they got rid of that just because it was too ludicrous, but I kind of like it. So I'm going to go in here, select linked, right click on linked flat faces, assign shortcut, and I'm just going to hold down Control Alt Shift F. And there we go. Now I've got my little hotkey, and I can grab one of those and just be like, select all those, select all those. Poof. And that is very handy, actually. I'm going to use that a lot. Another one I use a ton is just expanding or reducing the selection. And that's just if you have like a square, you hit Control+ on the numpad, and it'll expand that radius just by one more unit. And you can do the same thing, going negative. And this is especially handy, like just say I want to grab all of these up to a given point. I just hit plus a few times, and there we go, I got it. Woo! Or let's say I wanted to select the inverse of that, select all of these. Well, you notice I still have all of this stuff down here, so I'm going to select that, hit Control-L, or the button on my mouse to select linked. I'm going to hit H to hide it, and then I'm going to reselect this because it's either, do I want to select all of these, or do I want to select a few faces and invert the selection? So I'm gonna grab right here, expand the selection a little bit, and hit Control I, and there we go. I've selected that, and you just kind of learn how to start stacking these. You start learning how to think that way. In fact, a lot of times it's fun to kind of stop and actually plan out, like, all right, how is this going to work? Your brain wants to start thinking this way. Once you start doing too much modeling, your brain will start just modeling stuff that you see around you. And if you start introducing those tools for to stew on, like, it'll start learning how to use the tools, which is kind of fun. I always kind of geek out. I like that idea though of like you're just training your brain, or like you're letting your brain do what it wants to do, which is learn how to efficiently tackle all of these problems. And so I like giving it as many tools as possible to kind of like really try to chew on that. Oh, if you want to bring stuff back, you hit Alt-H. But that's also if you're ever working and then suddenly stuff disappears and you go, oh no, where did it go? Just hit Alt-H, and a lot of times they'll bring stuff back. Same with like if you're ever working in objects or whatever and suddenly, oh, okay, well, maybe they've changed the hotkeys. I think they changed the hotkeys. That is fantastic. Or let's see. It used to be if you hit 1, 2, or 3, or 4 on the keyboard, it would change you to that collection like number, which means everything would just disappear and you have to retoggle all of the stuff, and it was a pain in the butt. But I think they turned that off, which is fantastic. Okay, let's get back into this. Let's say you have a car, and I've selected all of these, then shift click on this. I guess that's a good thing to talk about for a selection. There's always an active object, or a lot of times there's an active object, and that is outlined in just a slightly lighter color yellow. And that means if I hit Control P, everything is going to be parented to that active object. So now if I move this, it brings everything else. And especially if you're doing a lot of mechanical modeling where you have a lot of objects parented to, main objects, it can be really handy to sometimes go Shift-G, which will bring up Select Grouped. And I just hit 1 because it's the first thing on the menu. But you can just go Children, and now you have this. And you can also just, shift click on the original one if you want to grab the whole thing. I don't know. I end up having to do that all the time. And so I just go Shift G1, and there we go. Selected all the children. And you can hide them. But also under the Shift G menu, there's a lot of other stuff like type. Like say you have, 10 bazillion lights all scattered throughout the scene, and you're like, I just don't want any of those lights in the scene right now. You can just go Shift G, select by type, and it'll select all by the type that's currently selected. And you can just hide them or put them on a new collection layer, which is very handy. And again, that's up here in the menu too. Select all by type, and you can just select anything. Like let's select all meshes right now, and it grabs that. Nice thing to be able to do. If you do a lot of instancing with Alt-D, what's great about Alt-D is all of these, as far as the computer is concerned, are the same object. So if I hit Tab, I can actually modify all of them at once, which is great for building, like city assets or something like that. Like here's a traffic cone. But yeah, you have all of these, you want to select all of them. Let's say you want to move them all into their own collection or something. You can hit Shift-L, or again, for me, I have that mapped to my mouse, so Shift-L, and you can select object data, or you can also see anything using the same material, which is another very nice way of organizing objects. So you can just grab all of that, and you have every object now selected that uses this same mesh data. So that's really handy. And let's see, a couple other final weird cases. Let's say we have a lot of these. We can select all these, hit M, put them into a new collection, cones. And so now at any point we can also just like right click on this and say, hey, select those objects, and we have those. We can also go to select random, which will just give you random objects. Right now this would be like, why would you ever want this arrangement of objects? But if you go into a local view here, and do that same thing, you can just have your random selection here. So yeah, that's all of the ways I can remember to select stuff at the moment. I'm sure I'm forgetting a bunch, and if I did forget some good ones, I would definitely love to hear about it. But yeah, all right. So have a good one.